Dorothy, to those who affectionately love her and know her, and Diji, as we know her, Christian. And we're so elated that you're here. And I've always been passionate about the fact that you don't have to have a room full of packed people to have a good time and to deliver the ceremony or the message that you have, because the people that are there or here for a reason. And I'm just so pleased to welcome you, and we have a wonderful, wonderful agenda for you today to celebrate for DG, and I'm going to let Tina say a couple of words.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being here, and I know coming from far away, Star, thank you for being here, and everyone that has come here. For the moment until both of my daughters are stuck in traffic, one coming from Marin and the other one from Carmichael, I just wanted to read a poem that was written by two rabbis, and it's called We Remember Them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, and I can't tell you how many times I want to pick up the phone or come home and my whole machine tape has been taken up by Diji.
That's right.
We remember them. And when we have joys and we want to share them, so long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. And I do have a prepared words to remember DG5 that I wanted to say right now. I won't go into it. But when my daughters come, I wanted to say that DG was a too much woman. For those of us as women, and we shine in the public eye, we get to hear, oh, she's just too much.
DG.
And DG, the women in this room, we are like that. We are just too much. And she really, you judge a life not by the duration, but by the donation. The donation of the time that you give, your involvement in the community. I can point at all the women in here who do that. It's the donation of who they are and how much they improve the world around them. So when I say DG was too much, she was not enough for me.
Fine.
So I'll just turn it over back to Brenda.
Thank you so much.
Oh yes.
Thank you so much, Tina, for those kind words and that beautiful poem. Let's give her a hand on that. We're not going to be doing long speeches and what have you today because DG was that way. And we all want to remember her fondly. The next person that is going to appear on this podium is going to be Reverend Dr. Tony Baldy, who's going to do our invocation. And DG thought very highly of him. As a matter of fact, he was the one that we chose when we were doing tree dedications to come. We never knew what he was going to do, but he had his little spiritual and way of doing things that was sort of an international likeness to the Sister City family. And I think since then, he's pretty much been commissioned to kind of do tree dedication ceremonies. So we had him to come, and he offered to come. So without further ado, I would like for you to meet Reverend Dr. Tony Ubaldi, who is also a Board of Trustee for the Vallejo City Unified School District.
Thanks so much, Brenda. As I look up and see the faces here, I see sister cities. And seeing the dedication that you have had through the years, and I'm very grateful, very thankful that you're here to share this moment. There are two, before I give the invitation, I'd like to state two stories, two incidents. Two incidents that I'd like to share with you. And that is, any of you recall the time when I had a fundraising for the area, HSC and HE? And we had I asked Diji to sing, and Bob Simmons accompanied him, remember that? Yeah, and how willing she wanted to participate, and then when she started, she forgot the words. What was the name of the song? Do you recall? Something very, very special, something good, oldies.
So was it Till Then?
Was it Till Then?
No. Anyway, she forgot the words, and we continued to help her, and just the fact that she's just willing to be there, you know, and making mistakes or whatever, it's no big thing. It's just being there, and as Tina said it so well, being there. And so that was one. And then about 4 years ago, when I was running for school board, and I remember that day that I had a big headline in the paper, Ubaldi, then quoted, I made a mistake. And boy, she spanked me for that. You know, I was visiting her. That was the day the paper came. The first thing she said when she was coming out of that hall, the first thing she said, Tony, you should know better. I said, I was just trying to tell the truth, that I did make a mistake, but you could have said it in a different way. You know, and say, well, I don't have the mastery of the English language, so, but boy, she spanked me, and you'll never hear the end of it. So with that in mind, let us be in attitude of prayer. Well, Lord God, it's not too often that you meet truly a beautiful human being. She was nice, gentle, and tough at the same time. Aware, truly aware, because she breaks down the walls. She cared about many, many things. Social issues, political, human rights, women's rights, civil rights, environmentally, national relations. It was obvious that she liked everybody. Her sister city's dedication showed us about her spirit of ambassadorship of Vallejo as she visited sister cities all over. She lived a life of inclusion. She loved music and the arts. She loved performing in front of us because she loved us. Yes, oh God, she loved us first. That's why we love her, God. We know that she's watching and listening to us, enjoying our laughter and recognizing the memories that she left us behind. And I'm sure she's enjoying our talks. This time to honor her and to love her. Thank you, God, for giving us teachings. And Dear God, we're all special because of her. We're grateful for her memory, her legacy, her embrace, her laughter, her giggles, and the conviction that she has to move forward, always moving forward, to generate, oh God, excitement and life. Yes, oh God, we're all better because of her, and we're grateful and thank you, dear God, for allowing us to embrace her, the short moment that we have been with her. We ask this, oh God, all in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom we pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
That was a beautiful, beautiful prayer and dedication. You summed DG up all in one. And Dr. Vivaldi did an article. He used to do Vivaldi's people, and he used to write for the Vallejo Times Herald, if some of you remember. And he did an article on DG, Dinah, and myself. And it was very well received throughout the community because we were reflective of, at that time, of the community and starting to embrace each other through cultural and through sister cities.
You were the Holy Trinity.
And now it's our neighborhood and community is changing, and we're changing guard as well. But prior to me introducing our new leadership in Sister City, I want to play one song to reflect on Dr. Baldy was saying, Amazing Grace, and it's done by Howard Hughes. It's a very short spew, so you just sit there and enjoy it. And then, as soon as it's over, we're going to have Pelton Stewart, who is the Vallejo Sister City Commission Chair, and we will also have Alyssa Stewart, who is the Vallejo Sister City Association President, to come forward and give us a short culmination because they knew DG as well. So I'm going to play this by Howard Hewman, and then this is one of DG's favorite songs, by the way. This is just...
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved like me. But for right now,
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pelton Stewart. I'm the current chair of the Vallejo Sister City Commission. And my connection to Diji goes back to, and many of you have heard me tell the story about Lonnie and Brenda Brumfield's insisting that myself and my family would get involved in Sister City. And they did. And it wasn't for that trip to Tanzania for a religious conference, I would have never stepped forward. But that made the connection for me when in that conference I had some time off and I went into a museum and saw a plaque from Vallejo. I said, that's God telling me to get involved in that. And that's how I got involved, following up on what Brenda and Lonnie had been telling me for a while. Once I got in, it was Diji who really reinforced the concept of me taking a leadership role within the association. And her and Paul Ligda were the ones that encouraged me to become the first vice president of the association. And there I had the issue of dealing with membership, so I got to meet a lot of people. But the people that kept percolating to the top, I'll spend my few seconds on, are Dinah, and God bless her, and please keep her in your prayers. She's dealing with some health issues now. A very wonderful person and a real mentor to me. Brenda, who she's here, we brag about her all the time, and Diji. And Diji gave a perspective that was unique and different to me. I grew up in San Francisco, so I know Reverend Ubaldi and his connection to Glide, and I know what a wonderful job he did there and what that church has done in that community, in this world. And I really felt that connection when Diji encouraged me to consider taking a leadership role and insisted that I do. I too got those messages that went on and on and on the answering machine. And I think every one of us, at least if you didn't, you missed a treat. But it's really her sharing her heart with us. And just like Reverend Ubaldi did when I asked him to step forward with the Boys and Girls Club, and he did help me in the Boys and Girls Club, these people are the giants, and I'm standing on the shoulders of them. And Diji reminded me at every opportunity of the importance of stepping up, of being a proud African man that is not afraid to say what I feel is necessary to say in this community. Many of you heard me say I didn't think that Vallejo, although it was diverse, valued its diversity. Diji's the one that said, well, what are you doing about it? Because that was her style. I made a point of saying that we need to value the diversity here, so she turned it back on me and said, what are you doing? And she pointed to Sister City as a vehicle that I could use. So I'll always love her for that. And when I was talking to my family about me coming up here, all of you know Kelly, and Diji knows Kelly, and Diji knows that when Kelly said, no more, she's saying I'm being too verbose. Yeah. No more. I said I won't speak anymore now, but I'll always have Diji in my heart. Thank you. Thank
you. Well, I'm Elissa Shanks Stewart. I believe everyone knows me. Diji was in the Bay Terrace Neighborhood Association with us in the late 70s. And by the early 80s, she was telling us how our family, our young family at that time, needed to get involved with Sister City. We didn't know exactly what it was, but she made it clear to us that it was something that we needed to do. And so, of course, we did. Our family has been involved non-stop since that time in the early to mid 80s because Diji laid that foundation. But that was what we needed to be involved in, and she was right. After a while, we were always association members, but after a while, for whatever the reason, I decided I needed to serve on the board. Probably one of the few boards I hadn't been on at that time in Vallejo. And then when a commission slot came open, I applied to serve on the commission because at that time, the commission and the association were not like this. That's the way I felt that it should be held. Preached it to us all the time. But it has taken us a while to get to the point where the commission and the association understand that this is what it takes to keep both groups going successfully through the city. So, welcome to all of you who are here. We know there are probably other people who didn't necessarily get the word, but we will tell them about this wonderful event when we see them, and we will remember Diji forever. Thanks. Okay, we're going to do some video memories that Tina and JD put together. But before we do that, Tina, can we let everybody get some food and be watching it as they're, because we're throats are dry and, you know, let's get some goodness going, okay? And I know you can, so.
Melissa, let's start with you getting some food and enjoying
All
yourself.
right, I didn't have lunch.
But I did put together a DVD. Her daughter Dundee, who is in Hawaii right now, their birthdays were very close together. And today would have been Diji's 97th birthday. And Dundee sent me, about 150 photographs that she had taken to a business to have scanned. And then she sent me down all those photographs, and then I selected the best ones out. And they're all family, from birth to her last Christmas. But right now, I think the only way we will be able to see it and then listen to the music is to turn all the lights off. So I think we'll eat first and then turn it on and have the music on. It was all the music that she loved. Yes. And it doesn't have her name Christian on it. Her name for a long, long time was Dorothy Ingalls. Born and raised in Modesto in the Central Valley, and good Nordic stock. And came from Modesto and went to UC Berkeley and got her undergraduate degree, then got her graduate degree in the Library of Science at Cal, also with a master's in library. So yeah. So please come and help yourself to the food, and we'll cut the cake and enjoy it.
This is part of the founding. Not saying struggling, because the city has been very tight about it. When I was there, I had a good friend, Craig Griffith.
Yeah.
And he was very relaxed about the subject. Now they have a new person and no, he retired.
There's so supposed to get
Even done. Yeah. Relationship. There's no. Yeah. How come there's no serving spoons?
To everybody, but there were comments about her being. You want me to speak into it? It's fine. Yeah. Either that or I can turn it up. Yeah. No, I'll probably turn it up for the rest of the people. It's been pointed out a number of times that she was a woman who blazed trails, she did stuff differently. But I submit to every single one of you that if you ever rode in a car when she was driving, you knew that there was no walls that she had to take down. She didn't see the damn walls. So that's how she lived her life. There was no wall there. And so I think that the message that everybody should take away, especially the women, is if there's a wall, there's because you put it there. Diji never saw those walls. Ignore the walls. Don't look for them because they aren't really there.
Thank you, J.D.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
It's a great honor to reminisce on a very special day for me. About 9 or 10 years ago, when I just was volunteering out of community gardens and PB, I started getting phone calls, like crazy phone calls, repeated phone calls, long messages. And I got a little annoyed, like a lot of people would do. And I showed up at the basement of the library foundation, the library building. And guess what happened? I finally met Diji, the person who was calling me, and because some people had recommended that I join and support and continue her legacy in any small way as an immigrant American. And I felt extremely blessed. Upon seeing her, meeting her, all my attitudes dropped dead. I was in awe of someone just like my mother, just like Jimmy Carter, just like the mother of our world, Mother Teresa. That's exactly who I felt. And rest is history. I'm honored to serve and continue in any way to celebrate the role of women, mothers, daughters, daughter-in-laws that the world has known because of whom we all exist, or else I can't even imagine where we would be. So with that being said, I just want to conclude by saying thank you for all this support and this sharing of the energy. And a few moments ago, when I was just watching that very touching video life story, I felt, play it again, let me have another glass of wine for Diji. That's what was in my mind. And before I knew it, Tina was just saying the same thing. And I said, oh my God, Diji, come on. So I just feel very blessed and very grateful that she touched all our lives. And I just want to conclude by saying that in each one of you today that I see right now, and the ones who couldn't be here because of circumstances, I see the work of Diji Christian. And the message is to continue to serve your community and love your fellow human beings and celebrate our Vallejo's diversity. Thank you, Diji. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, Julie, tell who you are.
Tell them who I am.
Because I get you long-winded.
Better. My name is Julie Stratton, and I am an erstwhile library employee with Diji. We worked together at the JFK Library, and she worked at many different places in the county when she came to us from Santa Cruz. She has been working at Santa Cruz Public Library. And then we both retired. Diji was not quite retired ever, but she quote-unquote retired. And then after I retired, we began attending events, primarily other library retirement events as people were leaving the county. And so, as I was just mentioning to Nancy Yingst, we had many strange and wonderful adventures together. And one of them was when Diji turned 90 in 2011, she expressed a desire to go to Yoshi's for to see somebody at the jazz club. So I got it in my mind that my brother and I, would go every year to Monterey to the jazz festival, and we had great seats. And so I thought, well, let me invite Diji, see if she is up for it. Of course, she was. She didn't know, my brother, she didn't know what she was getting into, but she, of course, ready to go. So we spent the weekend with Diji at the festival, and she had her walker at that point, and just constantly going. It was hard to, rein her in. So that was a wonderful trip. That weekend, when we came back, I think it was September 11th, 2 days later she left on the trip. And that's when she fell, when she was on this cruise. And broke her tailbone. So as a consequence, then things kind of went downhill. She was more limited, but of course she didn't realize that. She was still driving. and remained independent as long as she could. And eventually, after this incident with the broken bones, she was just really feeling, the physicality of everything. And at that winter, she was trying to stay home and maintain her independence, but her heat had gone off, her power was out, so she had a bunch of little fans going and heat going her ears. And eventually somebody, we were checking on her, but one of the neighbors turned her in, and she ended up being summarily sent to Vallejo Gardens with no warning. She was just lifted out of one environment to a completely different environment, and she managed to survive that move. And one of the things that happened was, I should tell you that she was surrounded by stuff in her old house. And a lot of the stuff was addresses and memos and things, and such, and paperwork. And so she had all of her address books of information was left behind. And she was just floundering without her stuff, without her information. But she just carried on, and eventually, she became part of the Vallejo Gardens community. And the thing, I guess, what I would really like to say about Diji is that she never stopped engaging with life and with friends, with other members of the community, and no matter what adversity came her way, she was like Wilson in the Castaways or the Bullet House. You couldn't really keep her down, in spite. She had lots of physical problems, and was in situations that she couldn't really control anymore. But it didn't really stop her from continuing to be a big, important part of our lives. So for that, I thank Diji. She's been an inspiration for me for years. And I'm sure that's for everybody else too who knew her. So thank you.
Thank you. Julie brought back a lot of memories, and as she was going through that, I can remember each one of those steps that she referenced. She left one out though. Remember Minnie, Julie? The kitty. The kitty. I know. We went with Diji, Julie and I, to the veterinarian when they had to put Minnie to sleep, and that was a real ordeal for us, but we all made it through, and she made it to the other side with it. But anyway, without further ado, I want to bring Rosemary Thurston up. Rosemary spent a lot of time with Diji too. She, like I, would take Diji to a lot of events or take her to, different homes to visit people when she wanted to go. And Rosemary would bring her to my house for Christmas, and we
have a good time. But anyway, I'll let Rosemary tell you her experiences with DG. And then we have one more after that.
Well, what can I say? She's a very, very special lady. But she and I were cat lovers, so we had that in common. And one of Tina's daughters also loves cats. So I love going to her house and walking up on the porch and seeing Mitty. Right? Mitty?
Right.
Yes. And and every time I talked to her on the phone, she always had to ask me about my cat, Cleo. And so we have that in common. So anybody who's a cat lover, in my opinion, is a very special person. And Diji was definitely a very special person. I was trying to remember the first time I probably knew her was through Tina. Probably the very first thing was politics, I suspect. But anyway, I feel like she was really an old and good, not an old, but she was a great friend. And we did talk on the phone after she moved to Oregon, and then I did go up and see her, I think, a couple of times. So I really miss her. She was such a joy to be around, and really, certainly, we get in very interesting conversations, as I'm sure you all know. So anyway, but she will be missed, and I think the city of Vallejo has really lost a very golden, good friend. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Yingst, and I knew DG for probably about 18 years. I also went to the movies with her once. That was enough. I like to listen to the movie and watch it without a lot of chatter in my ear. I did ride with her only a few times because I valued my life. And so, okay. Could you hear any of that?
Yeah.
Okay. But she was one of a kind. She was incredible. I will describe DG with 3 words. Thank you. Energetic. She, when I worked at the senior center for several years as the activity coordinator, but before I was even involved there in that position, I would go to the senior center, and so would DG, and she was the oldest person there doing jazzercise. She was so energetic. She would get up in the morning, and no matter what frailties were going on, or no matter about her eyesight or anything else, she would be there every time. She also started a living history group, writing the history of your life. And the group isn't there anymore because DG isn't there anymore, but whenever she started that group, it was so wonderful because she was determined. That's another characteristic of her. She was determined that people would gather and remember the things in their life that meant something to them and write it down. The best way to remember is by writing it down. And she always said, from whence we came, that is who we are now. And we should always remember that, remember our history. And so, as I said, energetic, determined, because determined was if you said no to having a Japanese guest in your home, she kept calling you and calling you. And I'm so thankful for that because I made so many friends. I mean, she'd call me and she'd say, I need a room for a girl. Okay, all right. Then 2 days later, I need a room for a boy. Okay, is that with the girl too? Yeah. Oh, okay. Next week, I have another girl. Okay. And she was determined. that you were going to embrace the things that she embraced, and she also knew that you would benefit from it. And I certainly did, because having those experiences with the Japanese guests was wonderful. And the third word I would describe her is interesting. She was fascinating. I mean, when you'd sit down and hear about her travels, hear about her history, hear about her life, she was a trailblazer. As Tina said, all the things that she did in her life, and if you sat down and let her talk about it, you gained so much. You gained insight into this fascinating person that lived life to the fullest. She put me to shame. She put a lot of us to shame, especially doing the jazzercise. When she could no longer do it, she did it with a chair. She was determined to continue fulfilling every day with a lot of life. I know we all have wonderful stories about her and memories, and I know we all miss her because she contributed so much to the community, but she also contributed to so many of us. She really touched our lives, and she will always live on in our hearts and in our memories. That's her legacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I told Nancy she nailed it. A lot of the things she said I can definitely relate to, and I appreciate her candor and her memories about Diji. And even though it's not quite a year, but my heart, and I hear some of the stories, especially when Julie was talking, I can sense the emotionality because Diji and I was very close. Whenever she'd say, let's, I'd say, go. And we'd get in the car and do whatever. Whether it was going to Sister Cities conferences, or whether it was going to meetings for NorCal, or anything pertaining to Sister Cities, she was a very, very involved person. And I just want you to know she touched a very dear part of me. We were close for many years, as you well know. You'd see one, you'd see the other, especially at meetings and so forth. And in her latter days, I would go up to the living situation she was in and have dinner with her. And I'm sure Tina can tell you stories about that too. And I just loved her so much. And I really miss her, but I'm not gonna go too deep because Tina has something she wants to say as well. And I think we're gonna be bringing Larry up. We're going to do Tina first, and then Larry, we want you to bring us up with some of the music that Diji loved, and she loved Larry because he would play and sing, and she would sing right along with him. So I brought him in today, and he's going to at least do 1 or 2 songs for us, and then we'll close it up. But before we do that, I'm going to let Tina talk to you and bring her grand beauties to vision for you.
Thank you, Brenda. I did want to just say a few more. There were some of you who weren't here when I did start talking, and I have referred to Diji with 2 words. Being told from when they're small, you're just too much, quiet down. You're just too much, you're too tall. You're just too much, you talk too much. And a lot of us were like that. And we grew up, and some of us would withdraw and be timid, but that was not her style. And what I've learned from her was the 2 things: to be curious. She was so curious about the world. She wanted to know so many things. She wanted to know about you, one-on-one. She wanted to know why you thought the way you did. Paula, I did want you to say a few words because she was honored in 1980. I could say so many things about her. She was honored in 1984 as a Woman of the Year for the state of California as a top Democratic volunteer. She was one of 10 women in the whole state of California that received that acknowledgement. She was always doing the volunteer phone banking and the precinct walking, and you could count on her for whatever you really needed. When I was the Democratic coordinator for Solano County, and I had the headquarters on Tennessee Street, she came in the door almost every day wanting to know what she could do. And you better be prepared for her. She wanted to be productive and active. That was another lesson. To be involved in your community. And just like you said, Robbie, you know, what is it that, you know, have an opinion about something, and then she would turn it around and say, well, what are you going to do? What part are you going to play in all of this? So when I go back to saying she was too much, she gave a lot. And for me, it wasn't enough. It was not enough of her. For me, she was supposed to live at least 100 years. When she turned 90 and then 95, she would say, I don't know how this happened. I'm still here. How did that happen? And we know people like that in our lives, if we're blessed, that you've had like a mentor who will tell you the truth and tell it in such a way that you learn from it.
It's not hurtful.
It's not hurtful. She was a humanitarian, and she believed in helping the world. She didn't want war. She didn't want the nuclear bomb. She was a big D Democrat. There are those of us who know what it meant to say she was a yellow dog Democrat. Raise your hand if you know what that means. Oh my goodness, Paula, you don't know. Okay. If there was a Republican, and I'm sorry if there's any Republicans in the House, but if there was a Republican and no Democrat, and there was a yellow dog on the ballot, we voted for the yellow dog. And that started in the South. That started in the South because when everyone had the vote, they were told, different groups of people were told, you have to vote this and this and this. And it's happening again today. So I'm not getting on that soapbox, but I will say that back then, many, many years ago, that when the ballot came out and they were being told, many were being told to vote for the Republican, if the yellow dog was on the ballot, then you voted for the yellow dog. That's how it was in her philosophy. So there was just so much she was involved in. I think each one of us in the audience represent a different facet of her life. From my grandbeauties to Vernon, to Ravi, Kay, thank you for coming. Would you like to say a few words, Kay? Because you had a special relationship. She inspired you to do some things.
She did.
And I think it would be great if you could say just a few words.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm actually on the way to a pre-bar mitzvah party, so I apologize for being late, and I'll be leaving early. I met Diji on the phone, and our relationship used the phone always, the 3 messages which ran out meant that Diji was going to ask you to do something. I also had my last time driving with Diji, she rushed us on to 80, and unfortunately a truck was also rushing by, so that was quite frightening. And I decided then that the driving with Diji should end, and I would be that. I'm sure we all had similar experience. We're all still here. Thanks to Diji, she wanted to find new hosts for the Akashi folk arriving in, was that 2004, 2003, can't remember. And I said I would be happy to, but I didn't want students, I would rather have one of the adults. And that turns out to be a most wonderful relationship. Shigeiko Nakanishi met me on the steps of the town hall, and and she said, "You can't be Kay Flavelle." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I am." She said, "Well, you've been described as aged 70. And you can't possibly be that." So I said, "Of course not, that's a gross mistake." So I don't know who was responsible for that, but time rolled by. Anyway, Shigeko and I established a wonderful relationship within the few days, and she invited me to visit her in Akashi, and I said, "I'm really happy to do that on one condition. Your husband has to give you permission to travel with me for 3 or 4 days so that we can go to Kyoto and Ogaki, which was the hometown of Ema Saiko, who inspired me to take up sketching as well as to illustrate poems. And so Ema Saiko was born in the late 18th century, lived through the mid-19th century. Her father was a physician in Ogaki, linked with the court, who also studied Portuguese. So the wonderful poems by Ema Saiko called Breeze Through Bamboo, there's a wonderful English translation. And she talks about at night, she's sitting by her father and he's studying Portuguese and she is studying the Chinese painters because her painting and poetry are in the Chinese tradition. So it's just a wonderful reminder how translation opens up cultures to us. And then so Shigeko agreed, the husband agreed that she could come with me. We went to Kyoto, we went to Ogaki, and because I had Shigeko with me, when we got to the graves, I said, "Oh, I wish I'd known you were bringing me here," because she'd kept it a secret. "I would have brought some flowers to put on the graves." And she said, "Just a minute." And she went to another group who had come in to they probably don't call it a cemetery, but when you're by the memorial shrines, and came back. They gave her some flowers. And then the Buddhist priest who was with them invited us to join that family at the tea ceremony. So that was my first experience of sitting on my knees for 40 minutes. And it was impossible to get up. I'm sure most of you have had that experience. And everybody but you thinks it's very funny. Anyway, I'm forever grateful to Diji for enabling me to go to Japan. I'm enormously grateful to her for all the friendships that she's opened up through the sister cities. And long live Diji. Thank you. Thank you, Tina.
Ladies, the grand dams. Are you going to introduce your grand dams, the grand beauties?
Of course.
Because they were like Diji's grand beauties too.
Oh, they were. They were. That's why.
You guys.
That's why I had the picture done over there.
Right. And you do that, Larry.
She was very much like her grandchildren. But I know that we're going to have a musical selection, so that's great. Lucia. I'd like everybody to meet. Lucia, would you stand up, please? She knew, thank you. And Sienna. And Seamus. And there's one missing, that's Scarlett. And Scarlett is Sienna's sister. Thank you. I won't torture you anymore. You can sit down. Thank you. So we did many dinners and holidays and all celebrating with Diji. Diji was a big part of it all the time. But thank you again, everyone. Julie.
Talk about the last time that you saw Diji, when you were up
I would fly up, and that's when Rosemary came up. She would come up with me, and if JD wasn't with me, then Rosemary and I took her out to dinner for her birthday. And then the last time, last October, a year ago, JD and I flew up just to take her out for her birthday celebration when she turned 96 years old. And we had a lovely time. She always had a restaurant picked out. She knew exactly what she wanted on the menu. She knew the people there that worked there. And so it was always an adventure with her, always. And you always learn something. And it also happened that her birthday fell on, and we were there, was the last presidential debate. So she knows who's in the White House. And I can only call him by number 45. I can't say his name, so I can only refer to him as number 45. But Diji and I were they had a little movie theater in her senior living community. And Diji and I sat in the front row, and JD was like rows back with Dundee and Steve. And Diji and I were like head to head. Every time one of them, number 45, but we didn't know he was going to be 45, would make a comment, of course, she would just lash out at the TV screen, and and all of this, and it had to be this way, and that's how Diji did not hold back. She never held back her opinion. If she was in the movie theater watching the movie, the whole movie theater knew what she was thinking. If she was in an auditorium and it was a Democratic event, she would make comments. And because being 95, 96, she could do them. She could do them. And earlier I said curiosity, determination. She was a very determined human being. In the very beginning of the DVD, there's a picture, it's the first picture, and it's her as a baby, but she was really like 18 months old. And her mother had taken her to get her first official portrait done. And Diji didn't like the way her mother fixed her hair. This is an old story. And unbeknownst to her mother, Diji, it was either 18 months or 2 years old, she went and found a pair of scissors. And she cut her own hair. She didn't like the way her bangs were. Even then, she was very independent. You couldn't tell her, what to wear or what to say. And she cut her own bangs. Her mother was fit to be tied, but Diji still wanted her picture taken. And at that moment, she was Dorothy. She acquired the nickname Diji years later, but then she was Dorothy Ingalls. So, Julie, is there anything else that...
What was the story behind how she became Diji? Because it was a contraction or something.
It was an abbreviation of Dorothy Ingalls, D.I., and it just seemed to her, call me Diji. Right. It was so much easier than the Dorothy Ingalls.
Quicker and more...
So that was her abbreviation of her name.
Especially when she got to Japan and was teaching English.
Yes.
It's easier.
Yes.
Than Japanese.
See, we could talk for days about all the memories, because how I met her was there was a tiny little postage stamp ad in the newspaper for homestays back in the 80s, and she needed homestays. I didn't know who Diji Christian was with the number, and I was a single mom. I was raising my 2 daughters, and I thought, how can I introduce them to another culture? How can I educate them that they can see how other people talk, eat, communicate from another culture, another language? And nobody told me. I just decided I'll call this up, see if I can. It would be another opportunity for my daughters to learn more. And that was when I met Diji, and then she in turn hooked me up with Kuniko Maruyama, who was the translator. Yeah, my husband's in the back. He loves Kuniko.
Oh, yeah.
And Kuniko and Tagashi came and stayed. Actually, it was Kuniko first, Tagashi next. Both of them as a couple, the entire family. For about 30 years, I've hosted Sister City people in my home. But I have to, going back to the beginning, I meet Diji, I go to Japan, I meet these wonderful, loving people. Fast forward, I'm engaged to JD, and I'm going over for the opening of the world's longest suspension bridge. And knowing their culture, every time they said, "And what house do you want to be in?" I'd say the house that JD and I will be in. That doesn't work in the Japanese culture. If you're not married, you're going to stay in this house, and he's going to stay in that house. And for about a month of different ideas and how they could arrange it for JD and myself, and I was perfectly content to be single for the rest of my life. And here's Kuniko calling me on the phone, and I trace this back, this is Diji's doing. But Kuniko is on the phone, and she is giving me a lecture. When you love somebody, you marry them. And I said, well, I'm so happy for you. She did not warm to that, and the next voice that came on the phone was her husband, Tagashi, who was a high school English teacher. And bless his heart, being the stern, straight-faced Tagashi, he is also telling me the same thing. Kuniko and I have been married for 37 years, and when you love someone, you marry them. And again, I said, I'm so happy for you. And he was just so, And here comes Kuniko again. Now my doorbell is ringing, and he's about to come through the front door. And Kuniko's on the line. I open the door, and he comes in, and I'm saying, Kuniko's on the phone. And Kuniko says, how would you feel if we gave you and JD a Shinto wedding? And I'm speechless. And all I can do is hand the phone to JD, and tears are coming down my cheeks because this is a huge honor.
It is.
And he gets on the phone, and he says, yeah, okay. Yeah, that sounds like Tina. Yes, we'll do that. Okay, thanks. Puts the phone down, hangs up, and I look at him and I said, what have you gotten us into? You haven't even proposed. So, fast forward, here we are. It's 20 years later. This year is our 20th wedding anniversary this year.
That's good.
And thank you. But Diji opened so many doors. She opened the possibilities that I had never ever anticipated or thought of. That I would be getting married in Japan, and we would be the first non-Japanese couple in 1,500 years to be married in the Akashi Shinto shrine, which was right next door to the Buddhist temple, and the Buddhist temple was destroyed in the Kobe earthquake. But the little 1,500-year-old Shinto shrine was still standing.
Sure was.
Again, Diji's determination, her curiosity, and do you have time for one more story? Yeah. Before I don't want anybody going to sleep here.
We got Larry.
So Larry's going to perform his wonderful music, but when April was in medical school, she was down in Monterey, and I wanted to go down for Christmas in the Adobes, and Diji wanted to come too. And so I got a motel not far from April's apartment. And this was my first introduction to, oh good. Wow, Tony, Helen, thank you.
Oh, Tim's face here. I'll put a picture on Facebook.
So it was my first introduction to Diji's physical fitness routine, which we had never discussed and I had no idea about. And the next morning, my alarm goes off at 6 o'clock. And out of the corner of my eye, I'm in my bed, she's in her bed. I see these legs are straight up in the air. And I look over, and she's doing her exercise routine at 6 o'clock in the morning. She must have been up since 5:30. And she was lifting her legs up in the air, stretching them left to right, bringing them to her chest, picking them back up in the air again, straight up, and she was doing her exercises. So, April, how long have you been a doctor? 11 years? So it was 5 years leading up to getting into medical school. So I'm just thinking how old she was. She was in her 80s then, at that moment. And she did those exercises every day. So to stay physically fit, keep your brain active. That's why she did so much. And traveling, meeting new people, listening to different languages. So, both my daughters would always expect her to be there. She was always part of the table. So, Tony, is there anything you would like to say about Diji?
I think I better.
I think you better. And I know you're a man of few words, so it won't be long. And I bet you just came from Hannigan's. Yes, I was at the church, but this was happening, so thank you. This is our former mayor, Tony and Tintley. For those of you who don't know, those are my grandbabies over there. And my daughters.
Yes, glad you're here.
Well, I met Diji many years ago when I was active, and she was active in the Sister City Club, and we went to Japan, and I learned things about Diji was in some ways very private, and so it was a number of years, really, before I realized that one of her secrets or talents was her singing ability.
Right.
And the fact that she had sung for the USO many years ago. And so I used to encourage her to sing when we were in situations where that was appropriate. And she would come out with she had a wonderful voice, and she had that ability that a very good singer has, which is to tell a story. The voice doesn't have to be perfect. What's necessary is the ability to tell a story. So when she would start something like, just remember this, a kiss is just a kiss, a sigh is just a sigh. When she would sing that, you could believe it. And that she'd had wonderful experiences. So I had a very good relationship, a very supportive relationship with Diji all these years. I always appreciated what she did for the community in many different ways, but especially her efforts with the Sister City Commission. So I'm sorry to be here on this sort of occasion where we're memorializing her. I wish it were a situation where we were celebrating her latest birthday, which in a way I guess we are. So that's my comments about Diji, a wonderful citizen of the land.
All have had such wonderful stories about Diji, and it doesn't just make your heart feel good. It makes me feel so good to know that she's left such wonderful and loving memories for all of us in our hearts. So speaking of hearts, Larry was one of her hearts because she loved to sing, and Larry loved to play music, and she would always like to reminisce on some of the old songs, and Larry is good at some of the old songs. I don't know that that's what he's going to play, but I can assure you I bet it is. So we're going to let Larry, did you have anything you want to say? I'm going to bring it over to you.
I do too. Can I say something?
Oh, Helen, gently.
Wait, okay.
Do you mind?
I'll have to wait, Larry.
This is Helen and Tim.
That's all right. I do have something to say. Diji
was such an enthusiast for music, and she was such a wonderful supporter of all my choral groups. She'd always call and say, "When's the next performance? I gotta put that on my calendar." And she would be there. She would be there so often. The Well-Tempered Voices and the Choral Society at college. Anyway, and she was always asking us to host students, and we did a few times, and it was really worth the experience. So anyway, I have good memories of her and how classy she dressed. She was a good dresser.
Thank you so much, Helen. I'm glad she brought that memory back to us, because that was one part of the Sister City movement and entertainment for our delegations that came in from Japan, was the fact that we could add the Well-Tempered Voices, or we could add our mayor, who was so talented with the accordion to play. And that added the whole cultural aspect of, the giving back. Because when the groups come and they want to share what they have, we also want to share with them. So I would like to thank you all for that during that era. Okay, Larry Critchfield is going to, did you want to say anything before you start, Larry?
No, I just know that she requested the song when I performed at the ceremony. That's that last picture down below there.
Oh yeah, going away.
Right.
This is when she left to go to Oregon to stay with her daughter, Dundee, and her son-in-law, Steve. So it was a big celebration we had.
Especially wanted me to play the song called Till Then.
Till Then.
And it was written in 1944. And I don't know if anybody has seen the recent version of King Kong, the latest one. I think it was filmed in the Orient somewhere. It kind of looks like Vietnamese or maybe even Korean or something. Beautiful landscapes with the rock formations coming up out of the water. And these researchers were going to find the latest incarnation of King Kong on Skull Island, which was all hidden by mist for a long, long time. And an aviator's plane in World War II had crashed on this island. He was spied. He got shot down with a Japanese warrior, another Air Force person to their side. And so, anyway, this United States Air Force guy survived, and he was hidden on this island living with these people that lived there. But anyways, to make a long story a little bit briefer, this song appears at the very end, and this man is coming home. It's coming home to his family.
Oh, wow.
To surprise him that he's still alive.
Wow.
And he has his old aviator jacket on.
Okay, and so
and this song is in the back.
Oh, wow. Diji certainly.
And I didn't know that until I saw the movie, which was after I performed it at...
That was it.
Yeah.
So that was an awakening for you at the library.
Yeah.
Wow. Very touching. So you're going to perform that for us. And this is one of Diji's favorite songs, I can tell you, because she asked that Larry and Laura, who were both there, Laura couldn't make it today. She's obviously doing something, but she sang with Larry during this, but you can perform that for us. Thank you, Larry.
Okay, you're welcome. Let's see. Pardon me while I figure out the nomination. Is that loud enough, everybody? Can you hear it?
mixing our music with mingling. So we have some music. Larry will play a little.
Play some more.
He's going to play some more. And we're going to mix and mingle while he's playing. How about that? And you're welcome to some more food. And I really appreciate all of you coming out. And it has been just a wonderful
Love fest.
yes, love fest and memory down memory lane with Diji. And I love you, and travel safely and take care. Thank you.
I just couldn't help doing this because on behalf of the commission and the association and all the volunteers and the entire citizens of Vallejo, we thank Brenda and Diana, who couldn't be here, the representatives of the Northern California Sister City International, and Tina, and JD, who put it all together, and Marvin, and some alien, and Pelton Stewart, and Elissa, and Dr. Ward, and every one of you, Marvin, and Paulita, Paula, the attorney, and all of you. Thank you very much. And I want to especially thank the twice two-term mayor of Vallejo, Mr. Tony Titoli, Mayor Tony Titoli and his wife. Thank you. And Julie. And Julie. And how can I not thank Bill Ewan? Bill Ewan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.